Hi everyone, you're watching Cricket Song with Lunar Wisdom and you're watching The Sacred Circle. We broadcast live every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we talk about a wide variety of topics and subjects, usually covering spirituality in some aspect. And this week, Tara is unable to be with me. She is out and about, but she said she might be watching. So Tara, if you're watching, hey, we miss you. And my special guest with me today is Kelly Ann Maddox from, you may know her as the Four Queens on YouTube. So Kelly's going to introduce herself.
Hi, babes. I am a spiritual counselor and a witchy woman. And apparently now I'm also Candy Floss. And yeah, I've got a YouTube channel and a blog, and I just do my thing. And I'm a tarot nerd as well. And I'm very happy to be here with Sherry. Sherry and I, we go back a ways. Yeah, I used to write for her amazing magazine and stuff. And I've watched her channel for the longest time. So this is really exciting for me. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here. Yay.
Yay. Awesome.
We're going to talk about spiritual practice, daily spiritual practice, monthly spiritual practice, whatever out there you guys are doing in your spiritual practice. I just want to let you know, because we do have some live viewers, that the Q&A feature is available on the event page of this video stream. So if you're on my YouTube channel, there should be a box in the corner that says become a live audience member. If you click on that, it'll bring you to the events page. And on there should be a link to allow you to do the Q&A. So don't be shy and ask all the questions that you can, because they'll come up and I'll make sure we answer them. Cool. So I guess we can start with how did you come to shape your spirituality or your practice, Kellyanne?
That's a really good question to begin with. Well, I think, I'm quite a haphazard individual and I love variety, and I think I came to a point in my life where I realized that I needed a bit more discipline, and I realized that there's something very enriching about doing the same thing over and over and over again, and that's why people do it. Like, that's why people chant on the mala over and over again or whatever, because it gets you into that ritual mindset and it totally transports you. And so part of forming my practice weekly and monthly was realizing that if I did certain things and I did them again, then they started to hold more power and more relevance. And that was really exciting. But, on and off throughout my life, I've always changed things up. I've never done the same thing over and over again forever. I mean, even, I've celebrated Samhain for the last 12 years in a row, I guess, 13 years in a row. I never let go of that, even though other festivals have waned and waxed in terms of how important they are to me. Samhain has been a staple on and off since I was 12. And even then, I've never done it the same way twice, even though for the last 3 or 4 years, I've addressed my matron, I've always addressed her differently with different words. So I like the frequency of things, but I also do like to change things up. I'm one of those people that has to. But yeah, I've been a witch in some form or another since I was 12. So there's been a lot of chance for me. I'm 31 now, so there's been a lot of chance for me to vary what I do. How's about you?
Yeah, I've Samhain has been a staple for me for quite a long while too. I find that with at least for me, when I find something that I like or I'm really in love with, then I tend to do that. Maybe, like you said, not in exactly the same way, but when I fall in love with something and it works well for me and I see success, I tend to do that frequently. And I think, isn't that sort of like human nature to find some sort of habit or ritual? I mean, isn't that sort of what we're all about as what they call us creatures of habit or something like that, right?
Absolutely. But it's so funny how many people can manage to do that in so many different areas of life, but one doesn't really stick spiritually for a lot of people, and two, a lot of the habits tend to become almost bad. Like, I have a habit of constantly eating this thing and I don't want to eat this thing, but it's an ingrained habit. And the other thing I find is, even if people, like, some people manage to get into a really good, helpful, healthy routine in their work life or in their creative endeavors or whatever, but I think a lot of us struggle to make good routines stick. I know for me, like, I really can have a great morning routine for a few months in a row, and then I'll just be honest, I go to like a 48-hour warehouse party, and then for a few months after that, I'm like, my sleeping pattern is screwed, and all I can hear is techno. I just go off that wagon of good, you know, waking up at 6:30 and doing my run, and I just lose it, and it's because of life. It's just because of the ebb and flow of life, or because I've been ill, or whatever, because I've been abroad and my timing, I get like confused time zone wise. Something happens to get me off track, and then I'm in that slump where I'm complaining, and I'm like, I'm waking up at 10 and I don't have enough time. And I work with a lot of people that are working to formulate a healthy, useful spiritual practice. And one of the key things I hear from them is I can't make it stick. I either can't make the journaling habit stick, or I can't make the daily meditation stick. I can't make it stick,
Why do you think that is? Why do you think it's easier for us to have bad habits stick and positive, healthy habits not? Why do you think that is? Isn't that strange?
It's so strange. You know what? I think part of it is a desire for instant gratification in a way. I think it can be quite difficult for people to wait and see the results of something. Like in psychology, we talk about having to have the same practice for 30 days before you see any kind of tangible result, before you actually see the fruits of your labor. 30 days in a really fast-paced world where there's so much going on and there's so much to entertain us and there's so many different things we could choose to do, that is a long ass time.
Yeah.
It really is. Like, I remember the first time I tried to meditate every day for 30 days, I was just like, why is this so hard? It should be really easy. I scroll Instagram every day. Oh, there was no Instagram back then, but I do these other things for every day that I don't even want to do, that I just find myself doing. Why is it so hard to implement this practice? But I think it's because you don't really see the fruits of the labor until you really actually do it. And it's hard to convince somebody to keep going with something when they're not really seeing a tangible result. Whereas, I think, like you said, bad habits tend to stick. Like, if we go to that vending machine at work and we always have that chocolate bar, like, the instant gratification of that is amazing. It tastes really good. You get a sugar high, and then you leave the afternoon feeling like you're on a hype. So you get that instant gratification. Later you feel like crap and you crash and you wish you hadn't done it. But there's an instant gratification, whereas spiritual practice, continuing it and being disciplined about it, I think at first it's difficult for people to see a tangible result, but there is one, right, after time.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. And I understand where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
So influences in our daily lives, you and just in general, the influences that we come in contact with, how do they tend to shape your practice? So things that you may intentionally allow to influence you or unintentionally. How do you incorporate them, or do you? I mean, how does it work for you?
Oh yeah, I incorporate everything. I really am one of those people that I want to take all of my influences, everything that I'm going through, everything I'm interested in, anything I'm reading, anything I discover, and I want to put it in there. But that's just what I'm like. I want my practice to be a living representation of what I'm going through. I think I really admire people that continue with a practice, especially as part of a tradition that is almost like, when I look at witches that are part of a tradition that's been going on for X amount of time, and that seems to exist in a vacuum, in its own bubble, regardless of what else goes on, regardless of anything else. It stays the same and it's held as that tradition. I really respect that, and I think that's really cool. But for me, I couldn't do it. I have to have my practice be a living representation of what I'm interested in. That's why my altar changes as much as it does. I don't just change it for the Sabbaths. I change it whenever I'm, like right now there's a picture of Oscar Wilde on my altar, because I'm reading his biography and getting into the idea of Oscar Wilde as the divine masculine, and I like that idea, so I'm going with that. I'm running with that.
Wow.
I had a Prince shrine for a while. It's
Oh, did
whatever.
you?
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
wow.
Whatever's going on, that's going to be on my altar and in my line of sight, and it's going to be my area of focus. My practice isn't stagnant like that. It has to be living.
Wow, and that's interesting because mine is very different. I mean, I have, and I guess maybe if I think about just my altar stays basically the same. It is sort of a stagnant, unless there's something that's really, when it influences me, it really permeates something, and I know it's going to be a part of my practice for an extended period of time. But on the same sense, because everything happens in this room that I'm sitting in right now, this is sort of like my sacred space within my sacred space. This is where my rituals happen. This is where I do my practice. This is where I write. This is where I meditate. This is where everything happens. My computer desk becomes sort of an altar of what is influencing me right now in this moment, the things that I'm interested in. But my altar, which is over there, is more, I guess, stagnant in a way. And so, I mean, even though it coexists in the same space, it's still very separate, although it is sort of blended within who I am as a person. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. I think there's definitely a spectrum between
Yeah.
keeping something completely as it is, like almost cryogenically frozen in time in a specific point where it's like, this is a tradition, it's non-changing, this is how it is, right up to like allowing everything you're going through, everything you're processing to be part of it. I think there's a spectrum, and I think what you're probably saying is that you fall more like here, whereas
Yeah.
I'm more like there.
Yeah.
But yeah, neither of us are over there in the cryogenically frozen part.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's important. I guess for me, I definitely understand your perspective, and I can definitely see myself doing that. But for me, I guess because I look at my spirituality and my ritualistic daily practice of it, not that my spirituality is totally separate from who I am, because it is, I live it every day. But when I want to go to my altar, I want sort of that moment of silence where all the other influences are not bombarding me. You know what I mean? And I mean, I'm sure it comes with having children and having, having a coven at the time, and having all the other influence always sort of needing and requiring my attention. The time that I stand individually alone in front of my altar, I want it to be me.
Totally.
And you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what meditation does for me in a way. Although, of course, whatever I'm going through is going to come in. If there's stuff that I haven't processed, it's going to come up in that vacuum. And the whole point of it coming up is to allow it to come up and notice it and go, oh, yeah, there's pain there. That's
Yeah.
yucky. And I need to like just sit with it. But I think meditation for me does that. It's where I just can cut all the strings. You know, when you walk into that room and close the door, you are cutting those strings. And that's why, you know, sometimes I'll sit down at my altar and I'll realize that my boyfriend's bass is just a little too loud next door, and I will like go in and say, can you turn that down? Because I really don't want even a trace of him in that situation. I can't even have just a little bit of music coming through or anything. It's got to be like my time to just be me. So yeah, I agree with you. There's a point where you need to cut the strings and just be you as a witch. And that's really important. If you don't get that, I think you can go a little bit mad.
I agree. I agree. So what is how much of your daily practice will you share with us? What sort of a day, your daily practice look like, feel like, sound like, taste like?
Good question. It always starts off at the altar because I feel moved to just get up and go straight to the altar. And then I will do what I instinctively feel is required. So I do not always do a devotional to my matron, but it really helps. So it will often be that, and that will involve like going through the beads and saying something specific that I've written for her. But then other times it will just involve meditation. It won't involve a devotional necessarily, although I will light her candle or, give her some form of attention, because I find to acknowledge the dark goddess archetype straight away in the morning just locks me into who I actually am as an individual, especially if I've had a random night's sleep. I go off on one in my sleep. I am not even here anymore. I'm sending people postcards from another dimension, and sometimes when I come back down into my body, I'm like, what the hell was that about? Like, I wake up feeling really topsy-turvy. So sometimes when I look at her and light a candle and address her, I feel like I'm looking in a mirror. It's like, oh yeah, there I am. That's who I am. That's what I'm on this planet to do. That's fine. So it's kind of a bit like coming back to myself. Sometimes I'll draw a card, sometimes I won't. Sometimes I will do, something else. Sometimes I won't. It really depends what I feel is necessary. Sometimes I really like to spend a lot of time at my altar. Sometimes it will literally be, I'll get out my Journey of Love Oracle, I'll draw a card, I'll look at it and go, okay, cool. And then I won't even think about what it means. I won't even get out my Book of Mirrors. I'll just go straight into doing other stuff. It really depends how I feel. Don't think I could ever do the same thing every day, apart from when I do my greater observances, which happen twice a year, once in the spring and once in the winter. And that is when I design a full-on spiritual situation for myself, where I become almost a little bit like a nun. And I'm at the altar 3 times a day, every day. I don't get much social life at that time. And I have to be at home. I'm like bound to the altar at that time. And normally I will do this at some point after Samhain or leading up to Samhain for 30 full days. And that's pretty full on. And that's more when it becomes like really extreme. But yeah, most of the time for me, my day starts at the altar. Whether or not it finishes at the altar, there's never any telling, aside from obviously if it's a Sabbath or a dark moon, then it will always end at the altar. But yeah, other than that, I don't need to go back every day to the altar. I'll tell you what I do though. My altar is working all the time. So if I'm doing readings for clients, or if I'm speaking to clients on Skype, I will always go and either light my healing candle or burn incense. So I feel like my altar is still living even after I do my morning stuff.
Right, right.
Yeah, and there's other things I do in the morning that I don't do at my altar because it wouldn't be comfortable, because I normally sit on a floor cushion at my altar. So I can't really do this at the altar. But one thing I do a lot at the moment, and have done for the last several months, is tarot study. And so that I do consider to be part of the routine. So whenever I'm done at my altar, whatever I'm doing, it's like plugging in, right? Whatever I've got to do, I'm plugged in. Then I go into the living room and I normally pull out Marielle or something else that I'm working to crack open like a crazy code, and I will study. And I consider that to be altar work. I just don't explicitly do it at my altar.
Right, right. That makes sense. And that's kind of like why I have my altar near my dining room table, because anything that really can't be done, because either there's not enough space or not enough, or it's not comfortable, then I can just, the altars for me is just like an arm length away. So I kind of feel connected in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my daily practice is very similar to yours, which, as much as I'm very structured, obviously there's very, I guess, intuitive flowing in it too, because I start at my altar and it's usually lighting my candles, not only my devotional candles, but I sort of like call the elements in for me, connect with air, water, fire, earth. I kind of connect with each of them so that I feel balanced. And although my day ends at the altar though too, it's just how, maybe it could be, I don't know how I grew up, saying your prayers in the morning and at night, but it just feels right for me. Although I will say that some days, if there's a lot going on, if we have company or we're hosting people in the home, sometimes I get distracted by other people's needs that I'm heading over to the altar and someone needs something and I never quite make it.
Yeah.
The flow of life. But yeah, my day starts and I do devotionals, but mine are usually not formal. Even though it is a devotional, it's usually not formal. But yeah, and depends on the day. I will go to my ancestor altar, which is on the opposite wall, but that's not every day. I find that I tend to gravitate more towards that if I have a lot of readings or clients that are coming in that I want to have I don't know, if they're a difficult situation coming up that I know the client is dealing with and needs a little more, I don't know, oomph, then I'll tend to go there. Although it's not every day, not like my main altar. So we're very similar in that sense.
What's your ancestor altar setup all about?
It has my maternal and paternal grandparents, along with my husband's maternal and paternal grandparents, and then my sister, who was not a blood sister, but she was my sister. She's set up there, along with, at least I don't have a visual representation, but whoever I'm working with at the time in regards to the darker aspects. Although it was Anubis before, But it's not Anubis anymore. But I'm just not going to share that at this time.
Fair enough.
But I do sort of a devotional or and it's not really a devotional either. I don't even know what. I guess a communing is the best with that sort of energy. Although the goddess that I'm working with, Danu, is very much a threefold goddess anyway. But yeah, it's sort of devoted to working with the ancestral spirits and that sort of energy for my ancestral altar.
That's really cool. Yeah, it's never been something that's called to me, so I've always been really interested in it. When other people say they have an ancestral altar, I'm always like, oh, what's that all about? Have you got black and white photos of people and stuff? Like, it's really cool.
I do. Yeah, I do.
It does looks really legit, but I've never felt called to it myself. I just don't. Yeah, blood family doesn't really mean much to me at all. I'm one of those weird people. I'm not a traditionalist in terms of family at all, but I do think it looks awesome, and I love it when people are called to do it. I think that those ties, if they matter and if they mean something, can definitely be really strong for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why it's sort of like bloodline. But when I have the picture of Erin, she's not blood, so it's sort of for me, it doesn't just focus on the blood connection, the bloodline, but it also sort of incorporates the spiritual connection with certain people who have crossed. So,
yeah, that I can understand, because I'm very into the concept of chosen family and that kind of stuff, and so I can understand that crossover and how it doesn't necessarily need to be about blood necessarily. I think that's cool because it's like an updating of what the ancestral altar actually means, which is really really awesome.
Yeah, I agree. I'm all up for updating.
Yeah, me too.
Keeping the structure of what has worked, but sort of updating that, I think, isn't.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I think that's where things start to really fizz. Is where you can appreciate the foundation of something, and I don't like to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I like to appreciate what's gone before, but I just want to build a little treehouse on top of it or something. Right. I like that stuff. I just want it to be me in the face of it.
Well, I think that's sort of important when we're talking about spirituality and religion as well. If I find that at least from my perspective, as our society shifts and changes and grows and expands, and we learn more, not only about our world, but ourselves, if you have a spirituality that is unyielding and is very structured, I feel like the majority of society is going to lose touch with that because it's no longer something that they can relate to.
Yeah.
And then it falls apart and we lose things in that and concepts and ideas that may actually aid us with our own development. If we totally, like you said, throw the baby out with the bathwater, then we're going to lose so much.
Exactly. It's no longer a living tradition.
Exactly.
It needs to be a living tradition for that nurturing stuff to come through to the next generation.
I agree. And if the next generation can't relate to that, then they're not going to carry forward,
Yeah, exactly. And then we're going to be looking at it all behind a velvet rope, and it's going to be owned by the National Trust.
Exactly. What was that? I don't even understand. What is that?
Yeah, like what the hell am I looking at? Exactly.
We do have a question.
Cool.
I am a gender non-conforming Wiccan. My family has no idea about either of these things, which has trapped me into being unable to practice my beliefs. I do not want to come out of the broom closet. How do I start a conversation like this to my parents? Oh, I do want to come.
I was going to say that.
I know that didn't make any sense. I do want to come out of the broom closet. How do I start a conversation like this with my parents?
That's a really good question. I would say, to be honest with you, there's no way to give a general answer because I would need to know what your parents are all about. I mean, are they jiving with Jesus in a really hardcore way? I mean, does that matter? Is that part of the issue? Like, or would they just be ignorant of what gender non-conforming means? Would they need a lot of help to actually get to the point where they would understand that? If it was the latter, then I would say I would definitely start by having a discussion about what gender roles are. I think most people can understand what gender roles are in terms of the gender binary. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. If you can help them to understand that and say, yes, we recognize there are gender roles, then you can segue into, do you see how these could be quite restrictive and how not everybody might fall into those categories? So you have to start somewhere where they can understand, and then just say, like, hey, some people don't jive with that. It doesn't feel right, and it's never really felt right for me. And then I'd always go with a big side helping of, I don't want you to panic about anything. Okay, that's what I had to do when I explained to my mother that I was bisexual and I was dating the girl next door. I was like, I don't want you to panic. Okay, I'm very happy and I love you, and I'm not gonna make a pact with Lucifer. Although if I did do that and you were frightened, you might be misunderstanding the concept, but that's something different. Okay, don't panic. Everything's gonna be fine. I think it's very important to soothe the nerves of parents when they might not understand, and so as well as breaking it down and simplifying it and starting somewhere where they can understand, I think it's also important to say, like, I am happy with this about myself. I've realized it about myself, and I would just be happier if you knew. And I don't want you to panic. I'm not saying that I'm in pain over it or that I'm distressed by it. I'm actually far more distressed by pretending to fit into this binary that doesn't represent me. If I'm allowed to be who I am, I'll be much, much happier. And I hope that that's okay with you and that makes you happy as well.
Yeah, I agree. I couldn't say it any better than Kellyanne. I know as a parent, all I want for my children is to be happy. So I would think that that's the general idea of most parents, that they just want their children to be happy. Although we as parents are dealing with fears and insecurities within ourselves. And I think sometimes it's very difficult to understand that your children's fears and anxieties and insecurities are not yours, from a parental perspective.
Absolutely. And I think one of the main fears that we have when we speak to our parents about things like this is that we're going to brush up against their shadows. I know I did with my mother. My mother was raised completely homophobic, and she knew it was wrong, but she was, it's in you. You can know something's wrong and still have that trigger, that reaction kind of thing. And so I definitely did, bump up against that, and it was not good. I think that's one of the main things we fear, is that our parents are going to try to project their fears and their prejudices onto us. And we're going to have to, like, make a break for it and just say, like, I don't care about that. I don't feel that way. And that can be very difficult, especially when you're living under their roof.
Yeah.
It's a different ball game when you leave the family home. Totally different ball game. But when you're under their roof, it can be really difficult to start that conversation. I think that's why it's got to start somewhere they can grasp onto, especially with things like gender non-conformity, because this is something that's been going. I hate the way people are talking about this like it's new. It's been going on since day. It's just that we're finally having a conversation about it. It's like those people that are like, well, paedophilia didn't exist before the 50s. I mean, we all used to get each other's cards and it was fine. It's like, have you ever heard about this thing called the social revolution? Like, it was happening. We just never spoke of it. And it's the same thing now. It's like, oh, now there's suddenly more than two genders. No, bitch, there's always been a spectrum. No, not even a spectrum. There's always been beyond a spectrum. Just we've never, ever talked about it. We've never talked about it. It's always been like, we're here, or we're somewhere in between. And there's been no dialogue. There's been no availability for dialogue. And now that there is, I think people that would think of this as something new and scary need to have it gently explained to them. Like, hey, this thing? Can you see this thing that happens in society? Yeah, no, we can see this thing. Okay, cool. Well, this thing is restrictive to me and doesn't represent me. Okay. But it's still going to be difficult. I'm not saying it's going to be really easy, like it's going to click for them and they're just going to go, yeah, no problem. But I think just starting where people can understand and not phasing them with language like gender nonconformity or gender fluidity or that is not a place where they can start. You've got to go to a place where they can begin. And you've got to take them on a journey with you. Don't phase them with language. Don't phase them with language they've never heard before. It's going to be really difficult for them, and they're probably going to get defensive because you're talking about something they don't understand. So just really, like, break it the fuck down, baby.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. And we talked about weekly practice or daily practice. Do you have certain things that you do within your spirituality that may not be done daily? I know you talked about spring and winter. Um, do you have any other things that maybe aren't addressed daily, but maybe are done weekly or monthly or yearly?
Yeah, I love the lunar phase. I mean, don't we all?
Uh-huh.
I've got a video coming up about that in a while, about my kind of relationship with the moon and stuff. And for me, the dark moon is very important, and the half moon is becoming increasingly important as time goes on as well. Not my choice. My matron is just like, hey, the half moon's important. It looks like my face. And I'm just like, okay, no problem. I'll set something up, yeah? So that's happened. So the moon's important. Obviously, Sabbats, they've become less so important to me. I really like Imbolc and I really like Samhain. I didn't even celebrate Beltane this year. It didn't feel like Beltane. It just didn't feel, actually, in terms of what was going on weather-wise in England, wasn't getting any Beltane vibes, I'm afraid. So summer solstice became increasingly important for me as I started to visit Stonehenge. But I don't know, my relationship with the Wheel of the Year, it is weird as hell. I'm thinking about making a video about it because it is strange, and not static in any way. One thing I do that I don't think a lot of people know about is I'm a real birthday girl. I celebrate Frida Kahlo's birthday at my altar, cake, candles, the whole shindig. I celebrate Carl Jung's birthday at my altar. I've been known to celebrate the birthday of William Burroughs, where I attempt to travel astrally to meet with him, and or I end up just reading Naked Lunch out loud. I really am of one to celebrate the birthdays of dead heroes of mine. So that's something I love to do. And I'm thinking about redesigning the Wheel of the Year so that it actually incorporates birthdays of people that I consider to be intensely cool, because that normally goes really much better for me.
How about Tesla?
Oh, everybody loves that. My boyfriend would definitely be really
Celebrate his
up
birthday?
for that.
Yeah.
My boyfriend's always going on about how incredible Tesla is. Yeah,
So
for
is my
sure.
my husband's going on about how incredible Tesla is too.
Yeah, he's like a totally unsung hero. He's just beginning to be sung now,
Mhm.
which is really cool. So I think my boyfriend would be very interested in celebrating, you know, the lives of dead philosophers and dead scientists in a ceremonial context.
Yeah.
That to him would make a lot of sense. You know, I've definitely always been interested in February the 11th, which is the date that Sylvia Plath committed suicide. When I was younger, I would always do something on that day, involving her and pictures of her, and I was really connected to Sylvia when I was younger. So yeah, for me it's really about that. I'm kind of a fangirl. I think that's what people don't know about me, but I'm an unabashed fangirl.
I love Sylvia Plath too.
Yeah, totally. I can still quote so much of her poetry, and I haven't even sat down and read any for the longest time, but I've really trained myself over the years to quote that shizzle. I really love her writing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Wow. How about I guess I'm like going off on a tangent. Poe, yes.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. Edgar Allan Poe's a legend. I think he's one that's more in the consciousness of witches. I notice a lot of people posting, like, I don't know, like kind of, yeah, pictures that are just like quotes from him and a
Yeah.
raven, or like, you know, that kind of thing. And his face is one that people know.
No.
And I think that's, yeah, that is definitely something for sure. Like
How
Edgar
about
Allan Poe, a lot of people are connected to him.
yeah, because he's such a known. How about Lovecraft?
Well, the thing is, I need to get into Lovecraft more, and that's like from coming from a KO, which is bad because
Mhm.
everybody knows that KOs need to be getting into Lovecraft. Like it's very important, but I just haven't gone there. Do you know what? Ages and ages ago, I was dating this girl who was just like, she just bitch slapped me one day and was like, I can't be with someone that hasn't read love. This is disgusting. Like I can't believe I've even kissed you. It's gross. And so she brought all this Lovecraft round, and I was like, okay, I'll get into it. I'll get into it. And I never did. And since then, my boyfriend has said, you need to read Lovecraft. It's
Me
really
too.
important. I've got to do it. But I'm so bad with fiction, Sherry. I'm so bad. I know it's bad, but I'm just like, there is some classic fiction, Lovecraft included, that I really do want to take the time. But honest to God, I've got this thing in my mind that just says, if you can read anything, read non-fiction, read about facts, very important,
Right.
because you
And I
might
was
die in a minute.
I was like that too until my husband has been a big Lovecraft fan for so long before I met him. And I went with him to a big convention here in Providence, Rhode Island,
Cool.
last year. And before I went, because I hadn't read any Lovecraft, he gave me a collection and said, here, and these are the stories I would suggest you start with, because they're short stories. And I'm like, okay, a short story in between reading, Ascension Magic and whatever else I was
The whole
reading.
curriculum.
Right, I'll read one short story because I'll be able to get through it.
Yeah.
And I read one short story and I was like, wow, yeah, I can see why you're a fan. Okay, I'll read my nonfiction and then, okay, I'll read another one. And then pretty soon I was reading more of his stuff than the nonfiction stuff.
Okay, cool. Well, it is a portal to crazy
Oh my
realms.
gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're a magical practitioner out there and you haven't read any Lovecraft, I'm telling you, he talks about bending the dimensions. He talks about sacred geometry without really talking about sacred geometry, necromancy and magic in a positive light and a not so positive light. I mean, he has just string theory in there and just quantum physics. And I'm like, oh my gosh. This is just amazing.
It sounds amazing. I've long known that I'm impoverished as a result of not spending the time, and I do plan to, because I'm a long time ago when I first read Alice in Wonderland, because I loved the film as a kid, but the film is not the book. Let's face it.
Yeah.
The book is so dark in comparison to the film. But the first time that I read Alice in Wonderland, I was like, this has got everything in it. Everything. This has got archetypes in it and like all kinds of shizzle. Like he's writing about deep psycho-spiritual concepts in a like you can look at it and see that. And so ever since then it's been really a sacred text for me. And so I know that there are things, there are fictional works that are portals, and I've long known that I shouldn't be Lovecraftless any longer. So this is yet another sign I need to get a grip this summer. I promise you I will.
You do. I mean, I'm so inspired. I'm writing my own type of stuff, carrying on through his mythos and ideas and concepts.
Awesome.
It's just so amazing.
It's really cool.
We have a question again from someone else. Okay, regarding your Christian background, how did you get the idea of the devil and hell out of your head? Being brought up in the Christian family, it still, after all these years, sometimes kind of intervenes with my pagan spiritual practice.
Okay. This is one thing that I help my clients through that I've not any direct experience of, and I'm very fortunate for that. I'm in one of those very weird and rare situations where I was exposed to hardcore devout Catholicism, but never indoctrinated into it. It was optional. My dad's side of the family were really heavy into it, but my father was staunchly atheist. And my mother was some kind of new age queen. So they were very much like, hey, if she wants to go to mass, let's keep on. But we don't want her going to confession and we don't want her to be confirmed. I had to be baptized. My nana would have freaked out if I hadn't been baptized. There is a limit, okay? You're crossing it with Catholics when you don't baptize babies. But yeah, like other than that, I was very free to just dip in and out as I fancied. So I got all the good shit with none of the unhealthiness. However, it's a key thing that I've helped clients through for a few years now. And one thing that I have to say is you've got to go through a process of release and forgiveness. You have to. And a lot of people want to skip that because they don't want to be angry with their parents for bringing them up just the way they thought was right. But forgiveness isn't about the other person. It's about you. And you have to let go. You have to say, I forgive these people for indoctrinating me into something that they thought was going to save me from being hellbound. And you have to experience anger if there is anger, and resentment if there is resentment. And you must externalize that, even if it feels bad, even if you feel like, well, I don't want to be angry with mom. I mean, she was trying to save me from Satan. Yes, she was trying to save you from Satan, but it's also really fucked you sideways psychologically. And you need to go through a process of dumping that stuff. You have to externalize it. And sometimes that means being angry and just feeling that anger. You do not have to express it to your parents or family, but you have to externalize it. I think that's the first thing. And the second thing that I think it's important to do is to gather evidence that your new spiritual desires and inclinations are right for you, are healthy, and are beautiful. And that takes actually giving yourself to it despite the fear of hell. So you have to start off, at least for the first few months, by having a consistent practice. As we spoke about before, consistency is key. That's where you get the evidence. And if you do that for a few months, you have all the evidence you need that this is right for you, that it cannot be wrong, and that you cannot be hellbound as a result of it, because it's so good. And after a while of doing it and getting into it and realizing that you become the best, most Jesus-like version of yourself when you witch, after that, you cannot believe that you can be hellbound, because you thrive when you're a witch. Like, I thrive. I'm a better person. I'm a more decent human. When I witch, I am not aggressive. When I witch, I lower my judgmentalism. When I'm a witch, I don't give people shit for things that are not their fault. When I'm a witch, I don't turn up to any goddamn shit show I'm invited to. I behave and I have dignity. When I'm a witch, I'm the best version of myself. How can that equate with hell? It's not possible. Like, when you witch, you are more Jesus-like. That's why we're always talking about how he was a magician. He was a witch. He used his powers in the service of others. Like, that's why there's a dialogue ongoing about that. And I think you have to show yourself, and you can only do that through living the life. Show yourself that you are at your most Jesus-like quality when you are allowed to express your spirituality freely. That cannot mean you're going to hell. And if it does, then God must really suck.
Yeah, no kidding.
God, I mean, that, because it's crazy. Like, how many people do you know that when they finally just let themselves have spiritual autonomy, they just changed in so many wonderful ways? They just became better human beings. And that can't equate to going to hell. Jesus is not angry about that. I'm sorry, but he's just not. He can't be.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that guilt can be very overwhelming, and anxiety. And I mean, I didn't necessarily have too much guilt when I left Catholicism to become a Methodist. And I didn't have guilt when I left Methodist to become a Jehovah's Witness. The guilt for me happened when I left the organization of Jehovah Witness, when I left them, when I disassociated myself from them. That's when the guilt, and I think it wasn't just from them, but it was like piled up. It was sort of like it had gained all this momentum, so that when I finally said, no, I'm not following Jesus anymore, who is the truth and the light and the way to God, that's when I was so afraid. And that fear is definitely overwhelming.
Yeah.
But you can work through it. You can, like Kelly said, you definitely can work through it.
Definitely, it's possible. I've definitely worked with clients who we started our relationship with them just like having nightmares of going to hell, and then like by the end they're driving with hell with 2 L's. You know what I mean? Like, it's but it takes time, and it does involve a process that a lot of people don't want to go through, of confronting your anger at being indoctrinated and regaining your sovereignty. You've got to break out, you know what I mean? And that does involve some feelings that are really icky for a lot of people. And I think the most common one for me that I've come across as a spiritual counselor is people saying that they don't feel right expressing their anger or their resentment, or externalizing their resentment at being indoctrinated, because they recognize the good that people were trying to do in doing it. They really do believe that they have to do it to save you from hell. So it doesn't seem right to be angry, but I think that anger is there, and you have to feel that. You have to allow yourself the whole gamut of emotions, so you can then move on and allow yourself to, like I said, to me Jesus was an ascended master. My mum's really keen on Jesus. She's worn a crucifix since time. She totally jives with Jesus. She just doesn't jive with the institution. My mum's keen on all the ascended masters. And so I think, to me, anything that helps you to become ascended in your consciousness, that's what he would want. And to me, that's witching. And I think that is for a lot of people. And if you can see evidence that you are becoming like what people would consider to be more Christ-like in your nature through being a witch, then that's important. Think how many people want to ram a Bible down your throat but are not at all Christ-like. They're not.
Yeah, they're not.
Isn't it more important to fashion ourselves on Christ than to insist upon dogma but not be at all Christ-like in our everyday lives? I would rather follow the example than force the dogma on people.
Exactly. I had someone get so mad at me when I said Jesus was a magician. Look at what he did. He manifested these things, and they thought I was poking fun at them and their beliefs, and I'm like, no, I am telling you, look, I mean, this is a good thing. I'm not making fun of your faith or your belief in Jesus at all.
Yeah, totally. Jesus is a very important figure in my life for a kind of a different reason, I guess. But I've always seen, I mean, I say depictions of Jesus, clean cut hippie Aryan boy, whatever, like the comfortable westernized depiction of Jesus. But I've always known his stories and listened to about his stories for a long time. My stepfather's parents were also staunchly Christian and were missionaries in India. I don't agree with that, by the way, up Hinduism. But yeah, like they really took it very seriously. They went over there and tried to like save people from themselves.
Yeah.
And so I've been around Christianity since I was knee high to a grasshopper. And there's nothing higher I can say about Jesus. He's an ascended master. He's a libertarian beta male. He's absolutely the answer for me. Like, he's the perfect divine masculine template. There's no mockery there. But I definitely would call him a magician, a witch. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. People don't like that much. I wonder why.
I don't know. And I don't know. It probably just the negative connotations they have with witch and witchcraft. Because
yeah, it's the King James version of the Bible, right? Like,
right,
you know, thou shalt not suffer a witch to live, which is not what it originally said anyway.
I know.
Yeah. Damn King James.
So I know, I don't know if you have a video addressing this, but spiritual slumps. And, you know, obviously when people are going through spiritual slumps, they have a more difficult time maintaining their spiritual practice. But have you ever experienced any sort of spiritual slump?
Oh God, yeah. I don't think I've got a blog post on it, but this year I'm going to revisit a lot of stuff that I talked about a long ass time ago, because I've been around for a minute now, and my views have changed and updated, and I'm more confident in front of the camera now. That's what happens to everybody, right? After a while, it's like second nature. It's like home. So I'd like to revisit quite a lot of things. So I do plan to revisit, but I had a big slump where I have my slumps where I'm less inclined to, like, I really have to push myself to go to the altar sometimes. And it's when I'm depressed, when I'm apathetic. And actually that's a case of just knowing what's good for me, because when you're depressed and apathetic, you don't want to get up, you just want to lie in bed and scroll Instagram and feel like crap about yourself. Actually, you come to a point in your life, and I came to this point a good 5 years ago now, where I know what's good for me, and I know if I sit down in front of my altar, even if I just light a candle, if I don't have the energy for anything else, I'll leave 10 times better. Well, the altar is the thing. Like, practice is the thing. It's what I absolutely need, and I will drag myself kicking and screaming there. I've literally gone into random like Christian penance before, where I've just like I've hit my knees and just asked my matron for forgiveness, because I can't be fucking bothered, and I can't even see myself as a witch anymore. I'm so low in myself. I've done that, and I've really felt the mother archetype envelop me, because that's all I can do. I've definitely felt that. God, yeah, especially. Yeah, I have a situation that occurs for me between my depression and premenstrual tension, and it's every like third cycle. I don't know what it is, but something just happens. I don't know if anyone else has that. I'm sure they do. I think I was told a long time ago by somebody that she had a similar thing, and that's the time where I really don't want to practice. Like, I really don't want to, but I make myself. But in terms of a massive spiritual slump, I went through a time where I stopped referring to myself as a witch. It was between the ages of 17 and I normally say 17 and 19, but I think I danced around it between the ages of 17 and 21. And during that time, I was on and off a witch and on and off a vegetarian. And I was really just like, I really care. I really want to practice. I really want to be a vegetarian. I really want to be a witch. And then I'd have other points where I was like, I don't give a shit. I want to do loads of drugs, hang out at raves, and just lose my mind. So there was a lot of like, woo, okay, what's going on here? And I almost totally gave myself to atheism at one point, but then I think I was like a nihilist for a while. I just lost it. I shaved all my hair off. It was crazy. I ended up in therapy. Eventually, on the other side of therapy, because I did have a breakdown when I was 19. So that whole area was a little bit sketchy for me, and I stopped practicing altogether. And when I was about 23 or 24 was when I fully came back to, like, it started with tarot. I was like, something's missing. Oh, it's the deck. I remember the deck. The deck was good. I'll start with that. So I went back to tarot, and then yeah, after a while, I just turned around and said to my boyfriend, "I need an altar." And he was like, what exactly do you mean by that? I was like, I need a fucking altar with candles and shit on it. But he was very, very, very cool with that, you know. So he was like, yeah, no, go for it. If you want to get back into it, get back into it. But yeah, there was that slump for a long time, but it was always in me. I was always really a witch, you know. I just had to go off the rails a bit.
Right. So what would your advice be for people who feel like they're going through or they're in a spiritual slump, but they know that they want to practice, but for whatever reason they just can't get it going? What would your advice be?
I would definitely say doing something that, for me, I'm all about taking a goal and cutting it down and cutting it down and cutting it down again until it's so unintimidating that it seems doable. And to me, I think if I'm really having major, major, major resistance to something, then I need to make it look really, really small so I'm not afraid of it anymore. And I really think if I went through a spiritual slump right now and I knew that I really wanted to practice, but it just seemed too overwhelming and too much for me, I would decide that spiritual practice for me was a daily walking meditation. So just walking along the beach or just walking in the woods and just opening myself up to the possibility of making that connection. And if it doesn't come, then it doesn't come. But I go on the walk anyway. And that's my spiritual practice. Something really little. I would never intimidate myself with a great big curriculum. I think that's what a lot of people do.
I agree.
They're like, I want to celebrate the Sabbats and celebrate the Esbats and do a devotional and get an altar together and read these books. Don't do that. Don't do that. You're really freaking yourself out and it's going to look massive. It's going to look insurmountable. Just make it your daily walking meditation, 5 minutes, round the block, anything, and just be like, that for me until I can manage more is what I'm going to do. It's the bare minimum. It's a daily thing. And for that time, I'm just going to let myself be in the seat of my spirituality, whatever that means to me. And if that's just hashing over my problems, then that's hashing over my problems. If it's just listening to the bird song and trying to enjoy that, that's what it is. And not expecting anything more of myself than that. I think it just starts really, really small, you know.
Yeah, I agree. It's building a spiritual practice. It's not
Definitely.
having a spiritual practice. I definitely agree. And you can build from that. I mean, I think for me, when I was, because I was living in my parents' house when I started practicing, seriously saying, okay, I am a witch and I am practicing, but I'm living with my 2 children in my parents' house who are devout Roman Catholics. And they had said when I moved in, no magic, no witchcraft, none of that baloney. So for me,
Is that a dare or a double dare?
it was so if I knew I needed to live there. I mean, I needed to live there with my children. So my daily practice was coming home from work, going, getting the children settled and going outside and sitting in the backyard on their picnic table and just speaking to the sky. I mean, that was my spiritual practice for the longest time. And then building from that, until I was able to do and practice more on my own.
Do you know what? It takes a lot of strength, though, to realize, like, this is it. This is what it is right now. I think it's spiritual radical acceptance because we are so, nowadays, everything is so available to us. We can see on Instagram the woman that has a new moon altar and a full moon altar and an ancestral altar and an altar to the goddess, and she's got a witchy room, and that's lovely for her. That's just marvelous for her. But if that's not you right now, and you need to either cope with the fact that you're depressed and you can't be bothered, or you need to cope with the fact that you're living under your parents' roof and they wouldn't like it. If you're coping with your own stuff, then don't look at her and think maybe one day in 10 years when I've got all the resources and all the money and all the time, I can have a spiritual practice. No, you can have one right now. You just need to make it align with your life, make it make sense for you. And in this day and age where everyone's showing off their stuff, and I've got no problem with that. I've spoken before about how I'm not an aesthetic. I'm not anti-materialism. I'm not anti-materiality anyway. But it is very, very difficult for people that have limited resources, limited time, limited funds, limited mental health to look at these people that seem like they've got it all sorted. And we know we're looking at their highlight reel anyway. They have their own shit. Everybody does. But when you see someone's highlight reel and it looks so good and you're like, I can't have that. I can't have any of that. then we tell ourselves that means we can't have anything. That's not true. You can have an incredible transpersonal experience every day of your life by just letting go of that belief that you need to wait until another time to be a witch. You don't. You can be a witch now with nothing.
Exactly. And again, even that wonderful altar that she has, or witchy room she has, she didn't get it overnight.
Oh, that's what I always say. I
She
always
didn't
say,
get
like,
that overnight. She built that. You know,
exactly.
it's something. I mean, I
Yeah.
remember my first altar was the curio cabinet that you can't see it because it's behind the backdrop, but that my ancestral altar is on now. But that was my first altar. Very small area. I had a shell for a representation of water. I think I had a little incense stick. I think it was one of 10 I might have had. And then a little tiny birthday candle. I mean, it was so simple because I had no funds. I had just moved into my own space. I was just, a single mom with the 2 kids trying to make things work, had a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, wasn't sure how the rent was going to get paid, but I wanted something physical. So if you want those physical things, it doesn't have to be extravagant. You can build up to it. I mean,
Totally. Yeah, totally. I agree. And I do try and give that caveat, not because I think I'm, obligated to give a caveat. I think if people don't like what I'm doing, there's plenty of other people they can watch. But I try and give that caveat to people that might be new or might just be feeling crappy about their journey. I always say, hey, before I show you my altar, I just want to let you know I've been witching since I was 12 and it's taken me a long ass time to get to this point.
exactly.
Yeah, really long time. And I don't, if I'd have been able to start out with everything I wanted, if I had the limited space and limited money and I could go out and get everything straight away, I think it would have ended up being some sort of caprice anyway. It's better that it started little, and it's better that it started in my teens when I had no money and no space and I had shared a room with my sister. It's better that way. It means that it's that much more meaningful that now I can have all this space and I can really express
Exactly.
myself. Yeah, you've got to graduate to that. I think that's how it's more meaningful.
Exactly. Because you think about it, I mean, at least how I look at it, anything that's just given to you, even though you treasure it when it's given to you, like a gift. Someone, my grandmother used to spoil us at Christmas, and she'd buy big Barbie doll houses. I valued it, I enjoyed it, but it meant more to me if I saved my money and then I worked towards buying it myself. And I think that goes for anything, especially when we're dealing with spirituality. I mean, the things that you learned, the personal gnosis you've gained on your own, the things that you were able to gather and pull towards you and you understood on your own without someone telling you things or without other people giving you things. I feel that it not only helps you understand things deeper, it gives more meaning, but you connect with it more, and it stays with you even longer. At least that's what I think.
It's so true. And I've thought about this recently because an increasing number of people are asking me, how do I get information about hell? What books have you read about hell? Where is she referenced in books? Where are her myths cited? It's very difficult to get information about her. And I really feel almost like making a video where I'm like, look, most of the stuff we know about hell came from a 13th century monk. I don't know about her from books. I've gone and met her. You have to get underneath, like, Jung said, there's the image of an archetype is the surface. That's the first step. That's nothing. You've got to feel it. You experience an archetype through emotion, not through intellect. And I feel like a lot of people don't know that. They want to hang their experience on something that can be verified. Nothing can be fucking verified about this shit. You need to go there. Book study is wonderful to an extent, but like you said, personal gnosis, that's where you quit being an armchair occultist and you've actually done something. And personal gnosis is something that can't even be transferred with language. When you come back from that and you've experienced it for yourself, you are stunned into silence. You're there at your altar like, the fuck? Whoa, shit, that was crazy. Like, you cannot even explain it. And I think that is what too many people are on the sidelines trying to read themselves into. You can't get the stuff you can get. That's great, awesome. Learn about the archaeological digs, read the history. I'm 100% not opposed to that. You know, I'm a bit of a like, you know, part-time academic myself, but there's only one way to get there, and it's personal gnosis, and you do that through doing the work, and that knowledge is something that stays with you forever.
I agree. Unverifiable personal gnosis.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
I love that phrase, and it stuck with me the moment I read it, and it's like, that's what it's all about.
Exactly. And unverifiable in the sense that you can't make that into dogma afterwards. That's why it's so creepy when people try to do that. It's like, no, that's your truth, and it's more powerful as your truth. Like Aleister Crowley says, every man has to cut their own way through the jungle. You have to find your own way. And
Exactly.
that's the point. Like, don't follow me. Don't, no, wait, this is not a signpost. This is my personal reality. Like, you need to go over there. That's the whole point. Although, of course, he did have a real thing for people following him.
I know, I was just going to say that.
Totally shadow side. That's another video altogether. And I am there for that. Okay, let's do that. But yeah, like, it's important to have your own thing and then not make that into a dogma. I'm really creeped out by people who try and do that. And I'm put off by people that try and do that. I like my unverifiable personal gnosis. I like it to be mine. And I like to interface with other people about theirs. And
Right.
we never ever have to force each other to believe each other. How great is that?
Exactly. And if you connect with someone on something and you feel it's verifying your truth for you more so, either through the contrast or through the likeness, then that's a wonderful thing for you. But it may not happen, but that's okay too.
Exactly. Yeah, I really love that. I think there was a protest that happened a while ago. There's this thing from the Big Lebowski. I think they call it dudism, and I think that's part of it. This kind of chill, everybody just be who they are kind of movement. But there was like an anti-dogma, anti-fundamentalism protest that happened in Washington D.C. a few years ago, and everybody gathered together and they bought these plaques that said things like, "Maybe you're right, maybe I'm right. Let's just go get a beer."
Yeah.
And I thought that was really clever. It's like a protest of people gathering together to say, why are we protesting? Hey, everyone just chill. And I kind of thought that was, I mean, I see the holiness in protest, believe me, I've been to a few in my time, but I like that idea as well of just like, maybe you're wrong, or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we're all swirling on a rock that's hurtling through space.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we should just chill out and like back off the dogma a little bit. And I like that. I think that's worth saying.
Yeah, I agree. Well, our time is up.
Oh, damn, I could go another hour.
I know, so good.
It's been amazingly energizing.
This is wonderful. I'll have to have you back.
Yeah,
You know, Tara wants you to come back so that she can join in our conversation. But when we're off air, I'll talk to you about that.
Cool.
But everyone else, thank you for watching. We've had a wonderful live audience there watching us, and thank you for participating. If you did ask questions, we enjoyed that. Next week, my guest is Yeti's uncle, and he is going to be talking about misconceptions in Satanism. And
good.
we're going to be sharing with him about misconceptions with Wicca. And we're going to chit-chat. And it was wonderful because he contacted me through the videos I had about a Wiccan's perspective of Satanism. So it's wonderful that we're branching out. And we're going to have this conversation because I think it's something that the Wiccan community could benefit from. Yeah, especially those of you who are solitary practitioners. It would be wonderful. So that's next week, next Friday, June 17th at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I hope to see you there. Cool. Kelly, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. And thank you for your continued high vibe work on the channel and with Circle of Friends. I really appreciate it. You've always been a really positive influence on me. And thank you for doing what you do, babe.
And you've been an inspiration to me, let me tell you.
Thank you.
I love you.
Thanks.
I love you all. Thank you for watching. See you next week. Bye.
Bye, guys.